Massachusetts is following California as it votes to limit miles people can drive because of climate change. You heard that correctly. Massachusetts lawmakers are once again at the center of national debate over climate policy and personal mobility. And this time, the issue hits close to home for anyone who relies on a car to go to work or to live life. Massachusetts Senate Bill 2246, formerly titled the Freedom to Move Act, has advanced out of the Joint Committee for Telecommunications, Utilities, and Energy and is now heading to the State Senate Ways and Means Committee. Supporters describe it as forward-looking climate initiative. Critics see it as a step toward government-managed travel. That does sound more accurate, but either way, the bill raises important questions about how far states should go in shaping how much, how often, and how freely people drive. That sounds much like the World Economic Forum, and they want to limit your freedom. But at its core, Senate Bill 2246 does not impose a direct limit on how many miles an individual can drive. There is no odometer check, no mileage cap per driver, and no new fines or taxes written into the bill. Instead, the legislation directs the state to set targets for reducing total vehicle miles traveled, commonly known as VMT, across Massachusetts. These targets would be incorporated into the transportation planning, infrastructure investment, and long-term emission strategies. Transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in Massachusetts, so they claim, as in many states. But from that perspective, lawmakers are arguing that the bill simply aligns transportation policy with existing climate mandates, which I thought we were done with, but apparently not in the state of Massachusetts. The state has already legally binding emissions reduction goals, and supporters say it's impossible to meet those goals without addressing how much people drive. And this is where SB 2246 comes in. They argue it's about planning, not punishment, and about expanding alternatives rather than restricting choices. I think it's about restricting choices, if you ask me personally. The bill also establishes an advisory council and requires state agencies, including the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, to consider VMT reduction when developing projects and allocating funds. In theory, this means more emphasis on public transit, transit-oriented development, walking and biking infrastructure, and land use policies designed to shorten commutes. Remember, it does get cold there in the winter, and I don't see people walking and using bikes on a regular basis unless you live close to work. But who knows? We're talking about the state of Massachusetts. But supporters emphasize that the legislation does not ban cars yet, restricting vehicle ownership, or mandating lifestyle changes. They say it simply provides a framework for giving residents more options. I love how they word this. However, the practical implications deserve closer examination, particularly for residents outside the state's urban core. In Greater Boston, where transit access is relatively dense, reducing car trips may be achievable for some commuters. In suburban and rural parts of the state, the reality is very different. Many residents drive long distances to work because there's no viable transit alternatives. Families juggle school, childcare, sports, medical appointments, and work across multiple towns. Well, that could be a problem. Small business depends on vehicles for deliveries, service calls, and daily operations. For these drivers, driving less is not a choice, but a constraint imposed by geography and infrastructure. Critics worry that while SB 2246 does not directly cap individual mileage today, it creates the policy foundation for future restrictions. And once the statewide VMT reduction targets are established, pressure will mount to meet them. And that pressure could influence everything from road funding and parking availability to congestion pricing, zoning decisions, and data collection on driver behavior. And we have covered this before on our channel. Even without explicit mandates, policy signals matter. When reducing driving becomes a formal state objective, personal mobility inevitably becomes a variable to be managed. There is also the question of trust and execution. Massachusetts has struggled for years to maintain and modernize its public transportation system, and the MBTA's well-documented reliability issues have undermined confidence among riders and taxpayers alike. Promising expanded transit options while existing systems remain fragile leaves many residents skeptical that alternatives to driving will materialize quickly or inequitably. Planning goals, no matter how well-intentioned, do not move people to work on time when trains are delayed and routes are completely unavailable. From a policy standpoint, SB 2246 reflects a broader national trend. States and cities across the country are experimenting with VMT, and that reduction is about climate strategy encouraged by federal guidance and funding priorities. The concept is rooted in the idea that cleaner vehicles alone are not enough, and the total driving must decline to meet long term emissions targets. And that's where you are restricted. Whether that assumption holds as vehicle technology evolves, including hybrids, plug in hybrids, and increasingly efficient internal combustion engines, well, that remains an open question. And you know what their goal is: limit your freedom. The bill's supporters argue that thoughtful planning today prevents more disruptive measures tomorrow. I love how they come up with these words. The translation is they want to limit your freedom. By gradually reshaping the transportation and development patterns, they believe Massachusetts can reduce emissions without dramatic lifestyle changes. Opponents counter that history suggests incremental planning often leads to more intrusive policies down the road, especially when initial targets prove difficult to meet. What makes SB 2246 particularly significant is not what it does immediately, but what it signals about the direction of transportation policy. It reframes driving not simply as a personal choice or your freedom or economic necessity, but as a behavior the state has an interest in reducing. For some, this is a reasonable response to climate challenges. For others, it represents a shift away from the long-standing American principle that mobility equals opportunity and freedom. As the bill moves to the Senate Ways and Means Committee, lawmakers will have to grapple with these trade-offs. Climate goals, economic realities, regional disparities, and personal freedom are all a part of the equation. The debate should not be reduced to slogans or caricatures. It deserves a serious discussion about how policies designed in theory play out in daily life. Massachusetts residents should pay close attention to this legislation and other states nearby like Connecticut, New York, and New Jersey, because you know this is coming your way next. Regardless of where they stand on climate policy, SB 2246 may not tell you how many miles you can drive today, but it helps define who gets to decide how transportation works tomorrow. In a state built on innovation and independence, the conversation matters more than ever today. If you like this video, give it a like and subscribe for more videos like this, and check out our car review channel, Car Smarts. You can support me by buying me a cup of coffee, and if you want even more content, check out the links in the description. I'm Lauren Fix. Thank you so much for watching.